Greetings, my fellow truth seeker. Are you ready to step onto your path and discover the hidden truth behind your reality? Are you prepared to expand your mind and go beyond the matrix? Good. Join me and welcome to your fate. Now let's begin.
Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Fate. How's everybody doing out there? On today's show, I am bringing you Dr. Adam Rizvi. He is a critical care physician, a neurologist. He hosts his own podcast called Letters to the Sky, and we are going to be talking about death, the dying process. Do we die? He has a new book out called Love Does Not Know Death. Stories of death, dying, and the miracles of true forgiveness. I'm very excited to talk about this with him today. Dr. Adam Rizvi, how you doing today? Welcome to Your Fate.
Doing so good, Christy. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Me too. I mean, we talked a little bit before we started rolling the cameras, and you had mentioned, my own story and coming a long way. And part of my journey, one of the biggest gifts that I have received throughout my transformation is losing the fear of death. But anyways, welcome to the show, Dr. Adam.
I'm glad. I want to hear more of your story, but I get it. Maybe
Yeah.
one of these days I can interview you and you tell us the story.
I would love to come on your show and tell you my story. I would love it. I'm going to start talking more about my own transformation with my own journey, but this show is about you. It's about your own story. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I like to begin. I like to always start and kind of figure out where you're at in your own spiritual journey, if you had an awakening, or how did we get where we are, where we're writing books about death, Dr. Adam?
Yeah, that's fair. You know, the interesting thing about death is it really is a gateway or a doorway, as you put it, because you can't look death squarely in the face and not start to ask yourself questions like, well, what happens? What happens after? That's like the obvious question. But then there's also a lot that happens psychologically with how we relate to death. I think for most people it's unconscious and there's a lot of fear. But I find that if you really sit down and you have the courage to just honestly look at the fact that you will die someday, we all will. It's the one thing that we all share in common, death and taxes. Taxes, it depends on what country you're in, right? But death for sure. And I feel like when I personally sit with death and mortality, it does something in me. It's a couple of things. It calls me to drop what doesn't matter. And it makes me immediately get real. I immediately start to realize, okay, these little things that I've been worried about, they really are not valuable. They aren't worth much. And I notice that I see that happen all the time in the ICU when I'm talking to family members and I'm having a goals of care conversation, which is what we call it. And I need to tell them that their loved one has a massive brain bleed and they're not waking up. If they've never sat down and had that internal conversation with themselves about death, that is a very hard place to move from, because I hit denial, I hit projection, I hit, no, this isn't happening. No, doc, we don't want you to we don't want you to tell me negative things. Be positive. And of course, I mean, if you knew me, I'm a very positive person, but it's also my job to tell you what's going on with your loved one. And what I notice happens is all of the little grievances that these family members hold just drop and fade away if they're willing to let them go. And then nothing matters except being with family. except being with your loved one, except holding their hand and telling them, I'm sorry, I love you, I forgive you, please forgive me. Like, these are the conversations that start to pop up. And that happens when we honestly face death.
Check. True. When you were telling the story and talking about death right now and telling me about your experiences, I kind of reflected on where we're at in the world right now and how distracted and how overwhelmed and how we care about so much stuff that just doesn't matter in our day to day. That we have just lost our ability to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter anymore because we're just distracted by our phones, or we're distracted by work, or we're distracted by the myriad of other things that are going on in our day to day lives. And at the end of the day, there's just all of these grievances that everyone holds on to are just not going to matter when it comes to the end of the line for you. It just doesn't matter. And we waste so much energy and attention and time putting our efforts towards grievances that, quite frankly, are not worth our energy or our effort to even consider.
Yeah.
Um,
And I notice, oh, sorry to cut you off.
no, go ahead.
I'll give you an example that I I worked both in LA and the San Diego area, but prior to that, I also worked in Southern Arizona. I've had patients that have been some of the most prolific, productive members of society, patients who have achieved just amazing things. I've had patients talk to me about uh, deep government projects that have made impacts that we can't even begin to fathom, where they had to sign NDAs and sort of deathbed confessionals kind of thing. And they tell me, like, I share this story with other people as well, but I had one patient who was involved. He played a big role in the Manhattan Project, which, if you remember, was the atom bomb, and the movie Oppenheimer recently highlighted. But he played a big role in that, and you'd think he would want to highlight that in his last days, but that was totally meaningless to him. He's like, yeah, it was good. Yeah, but it was my job. But what really mattered to me is, 10 years ago, he said, my wife died. What I wouldn't do to have her back and have a conversation, what I wouldn't do to go back in time and work less and just have more dinners at home with her.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that comes to mind with people, not we have such a hustle culture these days. We have a culture really focused on productivity. But when it comes to those moments right before death, I never see that as something that people care about. It's always about, did I forgive when I should have forgiven? Can I forgive myself for the mistakes I've made? Can I be present more with my family members and tell them that I love them? Have I spoken my truth when maybe I thought I couldn't? It's like, I guess one of the major drives for me in writing the book was to draw people to that moment right before death. You don't have to wait for it to happen. You can take yourself right now, imagine yourself on deathbed. In fact, at the end of one of my first chapters, I have an exercise where I guide people through that, because it really does something to you when you take yourself there. You start to realize what really matters. And for me, that is the beginning of the spiritual path. That's the beginning. And unfortunately, many of us go our whole lives and we only start to enter that path of diving into what matters in the days before death. And so this is a call to start now.
Yes, I love that. Now, let's talk a little bit about where you're at in your spiritual development. Where are you at? You speak a lot in the book about the concept of oneness. You talk about how we're all connected. You talk about, several different spiritual concepts. But, Doctor, what are we doing here? What's going on? Tell me.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably just as clueless as everyone. I'm just sharing my experiences. But I grew up, my dad was raised Muslim in the Islamic faith. My mother was raised Catholic. So I had a very interesting childhood where I was trying to balance the two, and it really drew me to trying to understand, okay, what fundamental truth exists across all religions? And I studied comparative religion at the University of Rochester because of that. I was so drawn to wanting to find that out. And I dived deeply into Buddhism,
Okay.
Tibetan Buddhism in particular. I dived deeply into Advaita Vedanta, which is sort of a non-dual path within Hinduism. And every time I went deep into one of these traditions, like Christian mysticism, for example, I started to find these points of commonality. And one of them was we think we're separate, but we're not. There's an appearance of, you out there, Christy, Adam over here, all these 8 billion people in the world, but that's just an illusion. And and I've seen it in so many traditions that are vastly different from each other. And so that's what came to this conclusion of oneness. The other interesting thing that every time I say this, it sounds so cliche, but I've realized from all these traditions, if you go inside and you look to see whether there is resistance or anger or fear or resentment inside, we'll find something. And it's that we need to heal. And I use the term forgiveness. It doesn't mean the same thing that I think a lot of people mean when they use that word. And it might be, if you have time,
Yeah.
I want to explain a little bit what I mean by forgiveness, because it's a term for me that sort of captures it all. It captures the whole healing process. It captures shadow work. It captures the inner healing. Um, what it doesn't mean is, okay, Christy, you said something that hurt my feelings, but I'm the better man, so I'm going to forgive you. I haven't forgotten the terrible thing you did, but I think I'm a better person, so I'm going to let you off the hook. That's not what I'm talking about. That's sort of a false charity. That's like,
It's a
you
ego
know,
driven. That's
that's totally
ego.
ego.
Ego
That's totally
driven.
ego driven.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of forgiveness I'm talking about. It's like a radical forgiveness where I can see that when someone does something wrong to me, they're on one level, I suddenly see all their upbringing, their childhood, their trauma, their abandonment, their story that led to this behavior. It's not personal. Their attack on me is not personal. It's it's just them expressing it. They're calling out for love, but they don't know how to express love. So this is their way of doing that. And then that's one level.
Yeah.
On an even deeper level, true deep forgiveness is the recognition that there's nothing to forgive. There's nothing to forgive because there's only one of us here. It's it's a play of light and shadow.
Mhm.
And when you see that there's only one on a visceral level, it's impossible to judge
Yeah.
because there's no one out there to judge.
Yeah.
And the common feedback that I get is, well, how can you forgive a murderer or a rapist or someone terrible, Hitler, for example? And I want to make it clear when I talk about forgiveness, and I'm spending a lot of time because this is literally the most important thing that my patients, when they face death, like this is what they go through.
Yeah.
How can I forgive someone who said something absolutely unforgivable to me or did something unforgivable? Forgiveness is not condoning their behavior. It's not saying what they did was okay. In fact, sometimes expressing love in those situations means you never talk to that person again. You walk away and you create boundaries. What forgiveness is, as I see it, it's a gift that you give yourself.
Mm.
You are letting go of the burden and the prison of judgment
Yeah.
because it is we imprison ourselves when we judge others. It doesn't feel that way, but if you honestly take a look at the feelings that arise when you judge and blame others, it doesn't feel good. It's you feel contracted and constricted. So true forgiveness for me is you dive into all those levels and
Yeah.
eventually you get to that place where you realize there's only one of us here and there's nothing to forgive. It's a big ask, but that's the goal.
Well, I mean, it is, unfortunately, there's too many of us that are not living consciously. Like when I listen to you talk, Like I've gone through my own evolution, so I understand, but you live consciously. You're in the moment. You're thinking about what your emotions are feeling in the moment. You're paying attention to them. You're sometimes asking, why am I feeling this? Like you're in control of your emotional makeup and understand that maybe sometimes you're feeling things for a certain reason or whatever, and trying to moment to moment, you know, understand where you're at, take your vibe temperature, if you will.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that that's really what we all should be doing, is monitoring our own emotions and asking the question, why did that make me upset? Or what is this trying to teach me? I find that to be the biggest problem right out there right now, is that no one is quite aware of where they're at and their own emotions in the day to day. We're not living as conscious beings. We're just reacting to stimulus, basically, is what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally agree with you. And I love the word that you used, awareness, because I think that's critical. That's the that's level one.
Yep.
That's the ground. To
Yep.
be aware in every moment. And even now, we can invite everyone listening to this show right now, just take a moment, go within. You can listen to others. You can still walk and do things, but you just have just a bit more awareness of, hey, how am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
And if you don't have access to your thoughts and your emotions, because a lot of people, it's such a foreign concept to go within that,
We don't want to feel our feelings. We don't want to
yes,
feel our feelings. We don't want to. Especially if
yeah,
they're negative. If they're positive, then like great.
yeah,
Nobody has any, but if there's any negative feelings, we will distract ourselves with anything not to feel pain.
it's true. It's true. I mean, and I can't blame them. The pain that can happen on this planet is immense. The pain that I've seen, um, at the end of life and with families, the grief
Yeah.
that occurs in this world is just tremendous. And to be honest, it takes a certain level of courage, a
Mm.
tremendous amount of courage to be able to face the pain, the
Yeah.
pain. But that's the only way out. That's the only way out, is to face it with
And
compassion.
I also think that because I have gone through a lot of pain in my life with my own health crisis and going through what I've been through. But it's only when you get through and you get on the other side of things that you understand that sometimes your pain is your greatest gift. It's a portal.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
portal to a new way of being. Trauma can lead you into the most amazing places. Obviously, when you're in the trauma, you're not feeling that way. It is only when you can get through it and you understand why things happen. And a lot of trauma and suffering can lead to like the best little nuggets in life you'll ever want to have. Yes, it sucks, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to lead to something teachable, a teachable moment, an experience, a door, something that's going to give you either a very much needed life lesson or um, give you a gift that you hadn't would not have ever expected in any other way. It's very strange the way that trauma and suffering somehow lead back to love in a
Mhm.
in a in a weird way, you
Yeah.
know? Um, let's talk about the fear of death. Everybody seems to really fear death. Even people that are the most religious people on the planet somehow do not want to face that they too are mortal and will die, even though in all of their teachings of whatever they are, a priest or a pastor, they know they're going to heaven and they should have all this faith that everything's fine after they die. Why do people fear death, whether they're religious or not? Nobody wants to accept that we all have this body has an expiration date. Our consciousness does not. So, how can we get more people to understand that so we can start looking at death as not such a tragedy, something that creates a lot of grief? And yes, you're going to miss people, but that it's a transition. It's not an end. It's not a period. It is what's next. It's the journey continues, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is to have compassion for yourself, to be kind to yourself. If you are afraid of death, that's normal. That is absolutely normal. Um, I would say unless you're fully enlightened, totally abiding in that place, I think it's normal for someone to have death,
I mean,
to have a fear
I
of
don't
death.
fear death anymore. I don't fear death at all. Like I I feel so confident that I am not that I am an eternal being, a fractal of the God. I am connected to everything and all there is, and I'm going to exist in another form. I'm going to be an awareness, a consciousness, an energy. Like, I'm not afraid. I've been here many times before. I'm probably going to come back. Like, I don't fear death anymore at all. Not at
Mm,
all.
yeah. It seems to me, when there is fear of death, it has to do with an issue of identity.
Mm,
If we There's a couple of layers of identity. The first one being the body. If we identify with the body, then obviously there's a terrible fear of death because the body dies and sometimes dies in very painful ways. Um, there's another kind of death that mystical traditions talk about, and that has to do with the sense of self, your thoughts and your emotions, the sense of, okay, even if even if the body of Adam dies, at least I, as Adam, as this entity, will continue on as a mind, as a consciousness, like you said. But in some of these mystical traditions, the non-dual traditions, they would argue that that itself eventually dissolves, and there's only a oneness, a sense of
source.
oneness.
Yeah.
There's only source.
It's only source.
There's no separate self. And it's
Mm-mm.
funny, there's a great quote by Rumi. It's sort of a wish uh, to others, to his students. And the wish is, may you die before you die.
May
And
you die
and
before you die. Hmm.
and it's deep when you think about it. What he's saying is, may the sense of separate self dissolve into the one before the physical body dies. And that goes back to everything you've been talking about and to the name of your podcast to begin with. In everything that I've seen and all the patients I've been present with, it's come to my awareness, and the conclusion I've come to is the only game in town is the game of spiritual awakening. That's that's what it's all about. And everything is in service to that, in my opinion. We like to say, okay, the purpose of life is happiness, to live a good life. But I think there's something deeper here. And to me, the game is waking up. The game is
Yes,
enlightenment, which
it
is what
is.
you're talking about.
Yes. It really is. I think the whole soul journey, in a way, is your path to spiritually awakening. And it, however many lives you have to lead and until you get to the point where you have that awakening, you will. But I do think your soul is forever going on and journeying and experiencing and learning and expanding. And part of the big Megillah of that is having the epiphany, the awakening, getting on your path and understanding who you are. It's about understanding who you are and what we are and what this is, don't you think?
Yeah. And the quickest way to that is to face the the fear, face the negative emotions, to face the anger. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation, even if you don't believe in an afterlife, there's plenty of incentive to really do this work, to do the work of healing, of forgiveness, because then it brings you to a place of inner peace. And
Yeah.
that is worth it. It's
Mm-hmm.
worth doing, worth facing the fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what it's like to be with have a job where you are um always kind of holding the hand of somebody at their last moments in life, and that you've witnessed the death process many times now. And you talk about in your book, you even seeing visions and a lot of synchronicities and some metaphysical experiences while these things are happening. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your most impactful experience about watching somebody transition and what happens sometimes when you're with people that pass away?
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, first, let me say, in the medical field, we don't really talk about this stuff. So, so it's not something I talk about often with my colleagues or even patients unless they're open to it. And I usually have to feel them out and, or family members. Um, my job is to care for the patient and do my best to help them survive and return home. If it looks like that's not going to be possible and it's the writing's on the wall, so to speak, and it looks like they're going to die, then my job becomes supporting the family as best as I can, along with the nurses and all the other people involved in the patient's care, supporting the family to slowly, psychologically, emotionally recognize that the time is coming and that they need to prepare themselves. That's like job number two. First is being the doctor. Second is supporting the family. That's probably the hardest part of my job because different people are at different stages of acceptance. Some people are flat out in denial. Others they get it, but they don't want to lose hope. They don't want to speak the words out loud for fear that it might hasten the end, you know? And I get that feeling because when my dad before my dad died, he had a heart attack and was in Istanbul at the time. And I remember it was one of the hardest things for me psychologically. And I'm sure I've come to realize most people go through this when someone they care about is actively dying. You don't want to fully accept it because you still want to hold the hope that they'll turn around. Even when it looks like they're going to die, there's a tiny part of you that wants to hold on to the hope that some miracle will happen, and that's totally normal. And so when I talk to the family members, I want to tell them and prepare them, but I don't want to crush that hope, and that's not my job either. So that's a big part of my job, and it's a hard thing. And I just want to say I'm not unique in this. Every ICU doctor has to do this in some way, shape, or form. So if you end up in the ICU, please have compassion for not only the ICU doctor, but the ICU nurse and the whole team. It's hard dealing with different families and different types of patients. It's hard facing death every day. Well, I like to say I get numb to it or I get used to it, but I never do. It's hard every time. It's it's tough to get to know someone, to know their story, to know their family and their brother and their sister. And John did this and Sarah did that, and like over a week or two, you really start to learn the family and their dynamics and their idiosyncrasies and who likes what and who's the jokester and who's the who likes to bring harmony. You get to learn the family only to have their most treasured loved one pass away, and it feels like it's yours passing away. That's a hard part of the job.
Mm-hmm,
Oh, but to
mm-hmm.
answer your question, visions and such, yeah, I have experienced a lot, and I'll just say I don't consider myself a psychic or a medium. I have no formal training in that world whatsoever. The only training I've had is in medical school and being a doctor. That said, um, I've seen some really odd things, things that I know if I talked about out loud, it would get
Ruin your
dismissed.
career?
Yeah, honestly, Kristen, even
I mean,
having this
let's face
conversation,
it. Yeah.
even having this conversation, and even writing this book, I had a lot of trepidation. I had a lot of worry. Like, should I even write this book? Should I even talk about it? I was definitely nervous. I still am, to be honest. You know,
Rightly so. Like, I don't dabble a ton in the scientific community, but when I went to college, my degree is in animal behavior neurobiology. So I'm very familiar with the dogma of science and how to have a thought that's outside the mainstream continuum of whatever topic you are going to broach. You're going to lose colleagues, lose opportunities, lose positions, and who knows what else if you're going to go outside of mainstream science and start talking about things that they don't acknowledge. So
Yeah.
that's why one of my questions was like, how do you juggle your profession and being so steeped in the science that in itself is not, I don't want to appear, I'm not, I would say science has its limitations in fostering new perspectives in the world because nobody wants to be the first to acknowledge something and be the one that gets ousted for being um thinking outside the box. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Did
totally
that sound
does.
right? You
Yeah,
know?
you don't want to be Galileo and then face the
Yes.
Inquisition,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes, and it's brutal out there. It's dangerous. So that's why I was
It,
wondering, like, because in the book you do see some magical metaphysical stuff that
yeah,
no one's asking you to prove. No one's asking you to
that's the
like,
thing. I'm just sharing
no
my
one's asking.
experiences. Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
No one's asking.
I'll share for those of you who maybe aren't in the medical world. I'll share what the current conversation is, and it's really it's the hard problem of consciousness. That is the fundamental um, conversation that's happening in the scientific world. And there are 2 points of view. Well, the first point of view is that consciousness is a byproduct of neurons firing in the brain. And that if the neurons are damaged or the brain is damaged, then consciousness ceases and just stops. That's one view. And that's the materialist view. The other view is that consciousness exists independent of the brain, independent of the physical body, and that the body could die, but the consciousness that was paired or associated with it keeps going, keeps on going.
But
Those are the
that's
2 views.
that's the truth, though. That's the truth. But science does not line up with that currently.
Now, there's some you might have heard of a guy named William James. He was a psychologist at the turn of the century, actually, a long time ago, over 100 years ago. But he said something that I thought was really interesting, and I feel like it helps bridge these 2 worlds. He said the brain could function like the way a radio does. It radio waves are all around us. They exist independent of the radio box. But when you turn on the radio box, you can tune in to a particular station, and then the radio will turn the electromagnetic radio waves into audible sound. So what this guy suggested, this psychologist said, well, maybe the brain kind of serves that fashion. It's tuning into consciousness, which exists non-locally, and it translates it into sensory experience that we then label as sight, sound, smell, feeling, touch, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think he's onto something. I think the brain does play a role in translating non-local consciousness.
I mean, well, they say the pineal gland is basically an antenna in your brain that is picking up all kinds of different frequency, energy, information. A lot of us aren't tuned to your pineal gland. A lot of pineal glands aren't working out there because all the toxicity we take on in our lives, and it makes it less functionable. But yeah, I'm in that camp that the brain is more of a antenna and that we're constantly picking up information. I feel like the mind is there more for processing information that's in our exterior world, like our seeing and hearing and temperature and all that kind of stuff. And it's definitely there to help us stay alive. But I think as far as making big decisions in our life, I really think that should be coming more from like our heart center, our inner
Mm.
guidance, our inner intuition, if you will, that we've completely shut down and don't even listen to or even think it's a thing anymore. We need to start looking um, more to our heart center, our inner knowing, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, all right. You talk in the book a little bit about something that's called the mirror principle, and I just wanted to bring it up only because in said book, you say, while you're looking in the mirror, does your image morph or change? Can you talk about what the mirror principle is, why you would use it, and what do you mean if after looking into the mirror 1 minute your appearance is going to change? Like what was that all about? I wanna talk about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
small comment in the book there.
Yeah, it's a small comment. I'm like, "What does he mean?" And I can't even remember what it was about, but you asked a bunch of questions, and one of them
Mhm.
was, "Does your appearance change?" And sometimes I feel like that's the case for me, that I start looking a little bit not like myself. I wouldn't say my appearance changed, but I
Yeah,
look differently. I start seeing myself in a different lens. What do you think about that?
yeah. Well, there's a couple of things, and this goes pretty deep into metaphysical territory. But what I'm trying to get at is noticing how much we identify with the body, even though we intellectually understand that we are not the body. The identification with it goes much deeper. It's it's unconscious. It's very deep. We are with this 24/7. So naturally over time the subconscious mind equates this with sense of self. But there are things that you can do, certain practices that start to break that connection, that start to dissolve the connection that what we see in the mirror is not who I am.
Mm,
It's just an image,
yeah.
and images shift, images change. And I think I noticed this personally, but there's some time when I look at myself in the mirror and it becomes clear that that's not who I am,
Yeah.
that I am the awareness within which the experience of a body looking at itself in the mirror arises.
Yeah.
And I think that's going back to your earlier question, is how to dissolve the fear of death is learning to identify with awareness and not with the body and not with the thoughts that you have or the emotions. If you notice, when thoughts come, there's a moment where they arise like a wave, they crest, and then they fall. There's a clear beginning and an end. Emotions, they arise and they fall. There's a beginning and end. There are so many things in our life, relationships that come and go, jobs that come and go. Each of these is momentary. And yet, underneath each one, there's an unbroken awareness that's always there. It never fluctuates, it never changes, it never vacillates. It's just the ground of reality, it's the ground of experience. The more we can identify with that as our true nature, the less we'll be afraid of death.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk about how powerful the mind is when it comes to illness and the mind body connection and how that can cause illnesses in our body?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much to talk about. Okay,
Yeah.
before we go there, I just want one more thing about the mirror principle.
Yes.
Um, the mirror principle also works with the way you see others is a reflection of how you secretly see yourself, unconsciously see yourself. The things that you say about others, you are telling yourself the same thing about yourself. Now, the reason why that works, in my opinion, as I've come to understand, and I don't propose to know all the answers here. I'm just offering my experience. If it is true that there's only one of us here, then what you're saying to someone else, you're making a comment about yourself. And there's a part of your mind, a part of your deep subconscious mind that remembers there's only one of us here. And so when we judge and blame another person, that part of our mind is internalizing those statements to be about ourselves. And so you wonder why there's this epidemic of depression and anxiety
Mhm.
because of all the garbage that we're saying about others, the way we
Mhm.
hate others, the way we hate politicians, the way hatred is such an intense emotion these days. And yet, throughout all of these expressions of hate, that part of your mind that remembers that there's only one of us here internalizes all of it. And it makes that to be about ourselves. So you can reverse that and begin a tremendous amount of healing by catching yourself judging and blaming, and instead work to see the innocence of another. Work, like we talked about, get to the core of their behavior. And when you recognize that it's all a call for love, really, then you start to see the little boy, the little girl, the innocent little boy and girl inside that person. And when you can say truly and honestly, you, my brother, my sister, you are innocent, that very same part of your mind that knows there's one of us here will start to feel, then I must be innocent. And then you tell another person, you don't have to say it out loud to them, but in your mind, you say, you are deserving of love wholly and completely. And when you say that about another person, that means you're telling yourself, I am worthy and deserving of love. There's so much healing that starts with that.
A lot of what we endure in this life is about healing our pain, healing our own inner child, looking within and finding out where our trauma is stuck. There's so many things. There's lots of illnesses that happen in the world now that are just a result mainly of trapped emotions in our body. You know, especially with men. Men, like, they're terrible at expressing their emotions or understanding what their emotions are or how to handle them. But you talk a little bit about in the book about the illness and the mind connection and how closely they overlap in some very, mystical ways. But why don't we talk about how illness sometimes can be created just through the mind body connection?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a huge amount of symbolism in the way disease shows up for us. I offer a couple examples in the book. Love Does Not Know Death. Even though it's about death, I do have a couple of chapters about disease. And the interesting thing is, if everything that happens to us is a call to awaken, then that would mean the same for disease. And my view, I see this often. I mean, I just came from work today. I was in the hospital today, and so I see this. This is how it works. You're living your life. Everything is going the way you want it to go. And then boom, something happens. You get a symptom, something terrible, some disease, a cough or cold or more severe, a heart attack, cancer, something impedes upon life's normal flow. The way most people relate to that is as an annoyance, like something that is bothersome. Like, let me get to the hospital. Let me find the drug that I need to take. Let me just listen to what the doctor has to say and get over with it and get back to life the way it was. What I would like to offer, having seen thousands at this point of patients come in, that's not the most effective relationship to have with a symptom or a disease. Instead, you can say, whoa, let me pause. Let me time out for a second. What is this telling me? And symbolically, what body part isn't working? What if I had to do free association? What does that body part mean? Like if someone all of a sudden has a stroke and they can't talk, right? Okay. Inability to speak, expression. All right. This is like obvious, but most people don't care to view disease as highly symbolic, which I think it very much is. It's very symbolic.
Yes.
And it's a call. It's a call to say, okay, the way you were living life doesn't work anymore. And so disease, to use your earlier language, doorway, disease is also a doorway.
Yeah.
And my offer is that when something like disease happens, the point isn't to go back to life the way it was. The point is to walk through that doorway and be a transformed person on the other end. And it means having a very important and honest conversation with you about why is this happening? What's the symbolism behind it? And also, when is it happening? This is this happens so often. I have just 2 days ago, I'm actually planning on writing a short article about this on my Substack, but I had a patient come to me. She had stroke-like symptoms and what looked like a heart attack. We ruled out a heart attack. We ruled out a stroke. All the tests were negative. And so I sat down with her and I was like, okay, tell me what's going on. What did you experience and when? And she told me the symptoms. She told me the dizziness and the chest pain and the shortness of breath. And then she said something like, I could swear I was going to die. And to me, that sounds a lot like a panic attack. And I asked her, have you had panic attacks before? She said, yes, I have, but this is by far the worst one. And so I told her, tell me about your life. What's happening? What's happening right now? Just tell me everything, not just the symptoms, but all of it. And this is another very brief aside. This is why as doctors, we can't be rushed. It's all about go, go, go in high volume. But for a good physician, if there's any physician listening, and if you're listening to this episode, you're probably already a great physician. But the key is just spend time. Let the patient share their story. And this woman told me it had been 5 years to the day that she left her alcoholic, abusive husband, but that her life was getting so stressful and she felt like she was being pulled in multiple ways that she didn't have any time for herself. All I had to say to her is I said, wow, that's interesting. That doesn't seem coincidence to me. It doesn't seem coincidental. This is the example of how, like, I have to be careful how I talk as a physician, right? That's the only thing I told her. But her eyes lit up. She caught on to that. She said, you know what? You're right. It can't be a coincidence. It's 5 years to the day. This is the anniversary that I left him. Maybe I need to look into that. I need to look into how I am giving so much of myself that I haven't chosen myself. I haven't chosen me. I haven't chosen my health for years now, which is kind of where she was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And she recognized, I didn't put any words in her mouth. All I had to say was, I don't think this is a coincidence. And she ran with it. And although we didn't give her any prescriptions, we didn't give her any formal diagnosis other than maybe anxiety or a panic attack, she went home totally transformed because she knew what this was really about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, number one, I just want to say thank you for doing what you're doing, and that a doctor like you that has the emotional capacity for empathy and compassion and has the understanding really of who we are, that metaphysical understanding that you have, that you carry in your back pocket, but you don't pull out all the time, is such a rare gem to find in a physician at all, because physicians are human beings too. Yes, they have great knowledge and they have great power to heal. They also have their own trauma in their own lives. And a lot of them are rushing around trying to fill quotas, not really understanding the true nature of where their patients are coming from, want to just give them the prescription and get them out the door. And I love that you're somebody that has the level of sincerity, compassion, and integrity to sit down and talk to your patients and figure out what's going on with them, not only physically, but emotionally. And it's rare. So I wanted to say, good on you. Good on you, Dr. Adam. You're a rare breed out there.
That's very nice of you. I know there are many other physicians and nurses and healthcare providers out there that do spend the time with their patients that they need to. And I want to shout out to them as well too. And I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for the mentors, the physician mentors that taught me how to sit with the patient and how to listen. And I actually think that's something worth saying for all of us. Actually, two things that came out of just this brief interaction was listen more.
Yes.
Be present. Be present. We like to share our opinions a lot. We like to put our 2 cents in, but there's so much more healing that happens in silence. I've had so much healing happen in a family meeting when I'm with other family members and their loved one, and I don't say a word. It's just me sitting with them saying, this sucks. I know this sucks, and I'm so sorry. and I don't say anything. And they cry, sometimes we cry, and nothing needs to be said. And a lot of healing happens in silence.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the second thing I wanted to say was, you made a point of even physicians are human beings too, and they're often doing the best they can with what they know,
Yes.
and all of us are, which is why I really like this phrase, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle."
Yeah.
We don't know what we're going through. We don't know what others are going through. There's often a lot of suffering on the other side. So there's a great deal of need for compassion these days, I think.
I think 100%, and I think that we are in a very strange time where people are starting to lose their humanity for one another and lose who they are and lose their connections. We're already disconnected as is. And I would love to see us stop judging each other and start understanding we're all fighting our own, inner trauma things. Like we're all going through something. Everyone, I don't know anybody right now that's not going through something. I don't.
Yeah.
And we're just in these really interesting times, and we should start really appreciating each other and understanding and listening and having that compassion and humanity that we're all struggling in this together and we are all one. We
Yeah.
are. We are. We're all the same. We all want the same things. Like it's just these divisions that we're having are just breaking my heart. Dr. Adam, how do you feel about your own death? I'm not scared to die at all. How do you feel?
Yeah. 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 Well, if I'm very honest, when I think about, I don't think I fear my own death so much as the death of others. And I think a lot of people are the
Mhm.
same way. I think it'd be, I think it'll be very hard for me when my wife dies. Um, and I'm not gonna pretend that I somehow am fully enlightened and that it doesn't bother me. It will bother me a lot. I'm gonna be very sad. I'll probably cry a lot. And for that matter, my mother or my sister, if any of them go before me, I know it's gonna be hard. And so knowing that, I can be kind to myself and say, you know what, Adam, it's okay. If you gotta cry, go ahead and cry. If you need to have several months of grieving or more, that's fine. And I think the more we can be gentle with ourselves, I find I start to become more gentle with others. And it
Mhm.
becomes this feedback loop of
Yeah.
tolerance and kindness
Yeah.
and gentleness. And I think we need more of that. And that's what death, when I think about death, and that's why I really enjoyed writing about it. There every time I think about death, every time I face it with a friend or a family member or an actual patient, I deepen my humanity. I
Yes.
become a kinder person. And that's why, partly why I wrote that book. The very last chapter was a call for kindness because that's what
Yes.
happens. If we really face death, that's what ends up happening. There's more
Yep.
love and there's more kindness.
Yep. 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 100%. I'm so glad you're out there doing what you're doing. And I agree. As much as I don't fear my own death, I certainly don't want to have to endure my mother's death or endure one of my other family members' death. You will miss them, no.
Yeah.
But my father died before I had my spiritual awakening. And since my spiritual awakening, I do feel differently about my father's death. I feel much more like, oh, it's okay. I'm going to see you again. Like, I do feel that way. Like,
Yeah.
I know that I'll see my dad when I pass over. I know I'll see him. Like,
Yeah.
I know I will. And I kind of think of it just like a long pause and not a goodbye anymore, like we're on break. I'll see him.
Yeah.
It's just a few years away. I'll see him. It's going to go by like that.
It really will. Time goes
It
by.
does. It goes
Eh,
by like that.
There's one thing I want to share, and I feel more comfortable sharing this with you in this context, but I really do feel that, as the book says, love does not know death. The love that we have for our loved ones, that is untouched by the veil of death, if you want to
Yes.
call it. The way we communicate with each other may not be through the spoken language, but communication can and does still happen very often
Yes.
with
Yes.
those who have passed on. After my dad died, I had dreams with him for months and months. I still do. They're less frequent now, but like vivid, clear dreams. And even when I'm awake, I sometimes feel his presence. I get intuitions about what he's saying and what he's conveying to me. And I feel like that's a form of communication we're maybe not used to, but
Yes.
it's arguably more of a truer form of communication when we connect with each other.
Absolutely. I also think there's so many people now that are out talking about their own near death experiences. Like there's so many people that have had a very similar experience, having experienced going out of their body and having a consciousness and either seeing a light or seeing a loved one or having the ability to navigate out of their body, and they can see their body in their bed like, "Oh, that was me down there. Now I'm here. What is this?" They're confused, but all of them have the same kind of story that the progression of what happens, they end up getting pulled back into their body. Coming from my perspective, where I felt for most of my life that when you died, you just ended. You just were like
Mhm.
a tree. You were grown from the earth. You come up, you have a life, and then you die and you go back to the earth, and that was your cycle. And now I understand so much more. I've had lives before this life, and I'm going to have lives after this life. And I'm on a soul journey. I am a soul in a meat suit. I'm not a meat suit with a soul. I am a soul, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that's
You
the
know,
issue of identity. Yeah, it
yeah,
changes things when you shift your
yeah,
identity.
yeah, Dr. Adam, like, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Like, I'm so glad you're out there and your book's amazing and it allows you to peek behind the veil a little bit in a way that you've never seen before, especially coming from your perspective where you've had to, you know, usher people along and be there through their own transition, whether it be family or your patients. And I really want to see a time where we see more rejoicing, not rejoicing, but maybe like a bit of losing the heaviness of death and
Mhm.
honoring the life that they had without it being the end of the world. Like so many people are so beyond themselves when somebody dies. And I would like to see our culture shift to a place where we're seeing it more as a period to celebrate someone's life, not be so devastated because we don't have them so much in our lives the way we're used to having them, even though they very much are still a part of our lives. We just can't interpret them the way we used to, you
Yeah,
know?
I think we'll get there as a society. I think the fact that we have things like death doulas, is
Mm,
I mean, we didn't even talk
yep.
about that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, that's an indicator of a shift in our society, an openness to death and an acceptance that there's something precious that's happening at that moment. I think
Yeah.
we're moving in that direction.
Yes. Um, Dr. Adam, thank you so much for
Oh,
coming on
same
the
to
show.
you.
I mean,
Thank
death can always be an interesting conversation, and I honestly haven't had a whole lot of experience with witnessing death or the death process. I've lost my father and a couple of grandparents, but I have not lived your shoes and walked what you've walked with as many experiences, many of which in your book sounded really beautiful experiences to
Yeah.
have in your
Yeah, they're
life. The
joy.
life experience you're having is just like amazing in that regard. But I wanted to thank you for sharing your time. I will put your book in the show notes.
Thank you. I think I have a sign up to a newsletter on lovedoesnotknowdeath.com. But I would
Mm.
say the most of my writing, and I like to share all the things that I learned at work and with my patients, on Substack. And my Substack is
Okay.
called Adventures in Kindness. Or you could go to adamrizvi.substack.com.
Okay. I'm going to put that down. That's- Okay. I'll put that in the show notes.
Awesome.
And you, sir, always have a spot here on this show. I think you are a complete light, and I'm super
As are
happy you're out there.
you.
Oh, very
Thank
excited. It was a blessing to meet you, and I hope our paths cross again. I know that if I'm at my deathbed, I want you at my
That's very kind of you. Wonderful. Yeah, well, the
Um,
perfect person will be with you, whoever it is, on your deathbed, I'm sure.
and nobody dies before they're supposed to, right?
Exactly. Yes,
Nobody. That's the other thing
I
about
agree.
dying,
I
you
agree.
guys.
Yep.
No one dies before they're supposed to die, which is why you have near death experiences. Because basically, they get up there and they're like, nah, bitch, it's not your time. You got to go back down.
Yeah.
That's basically what happens.
Yeah.
Like, not your time. Sorry, bro. You got to go
It's
back.
true.
And they're
It's
like, no,
true.
I'm going back. Anyway,
It's so
anyways,
true.
guys. With that, you guys, thank you, Dr. Adam, for coming on the show today. And we will see you next week on Fate, everyone. That's all we got for this episode, gang. We will see you next week on Fate from Atheism to Enlightenment. Thank you, Dr. Adam Rizvi. His book will be in the show notes. And welcome to your fate, everyone. We'll see you next week. Journey well.